Welcome back to Tide Pod on the YouTube home of Tide Illustrated. Tony Sukalis and myself, Jack Knowlton, once again joining you from my dungeon-looking hotel room in Cleveland, Ohio, for the last time, in fact, because like Alabama, we will be advancing to Newark to watch the Crimson Tide play in the second weekend. Alabama overcomes the St. Mary's hurdle. They won the war of tempo, so to speak, Tony, as this one seemed like it was getting labeled. Going in, the Tide beat the Gales 80-66. And I'm going to start with my favorite fact, which is that is the first time a team has scored 80 or more points against the Gales in 105 games. They do not allow that very often. Big win for Alabama to advance to the Sweet 16 here, Tony. And you know, just overall, just an impressive. I mean, I keep seeing the numbers, obviously. So it's third Sweet 16 in a row. He's now gone there 4 of the last 5 seasons. Just an impressive thing that he's done with this program. We're going to talk their path from there, and we'll do some kind of recapping of the first round too, Tony. But just an impressive feat on Sunday to get the win over St. Mary's and continuing the consistency in the tournament. I know you wrote about that this morning with Nate Oates and Alabama and what he's been able to do for this program.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great start. The point I made in my column is, it's a great start to the tournament, if you want to say. But Alabama's been in the NCAA tournament, it seems like, for the last 2 months. That was the 15th game, if you believe it, in a row that Alabama's played against a tournament opponent. The last one that they played against a non-tournament opponent would have been January 25th against LSU. So this is a battle-tested bunch. If anything, when you look at the quality of competition, especially when you look at the Sweet 16, that was a bit of a breather, if you'll believe it, for Alabama in terms of the competition it's faced. Alabama has faced 8 of the 16 teams remaining in the Sweet 16. You got to keep in mind they are one of the Sweet 16 teams. So they faced 8 teams in the Sweet 16 out of the 15 they could have faced, which is just crazy when you think about it. But the fact that Nate Oates has brought this team back to the Sweet 16 for the 3rd straight year is just really impressive, especially to do so in what has been such a gauntlet of a season. I think Alabama's really tested, and I actually really like their chances of going back to the Final Four, just because they're one of the more battle-tested bunches, and they've seen just about anything you can throw at them, whether it's slow tempos like they did this past weekend, or fast tempos like Kentucky, like they might face, like BYU, like they are going to face next week or this week. That they've just done everything, and so I think it's been really impressive. It just seems like whatever they're faced up against, they have an answer for.
Yeah, so I mean, let's do some rehashing from those tests that, you're right, on paper were easier for Alabama, but still, tournament teams can't overlook them, which Alabama seemed like it might have done against Robert Morris. But some growth points, they really kind of rise to the challenge, I thought, against St. Mary's overall. And obviously the main category that came in on Sunday night was the rebounding battle. Now, credit to St. Mary's. They're the number 2 offensive rebounding team in the country. To your point of playing good teams, Alabama played the best one. It was Texas. It's Texas A&M, right, who, of course, Alabama beat back in January. St. Mary's still got 15-0 boards, but Alabama, I thought, Tony, was so much better on the glass from game 1 to game 2 in this tournament. Won the rebounding battle 41-36 over St. Mary's. You had Clifford Omoruyi getting a double-double with 11 rebounds. Grant playing a full game certainly helped with that, in my opinion. What did you think of the growth in that category, especially with how much of a point of emphasis, Nate Oates made? I mean, in the build-up to this game, there's the talk. It wasn't, everyone wanted to talk about tempo, and he kept just going back to, we have to rebound the basketball. And I thought the players really rose to that challenge, which I think is a good sign for them going forward here.
We've came such a long way with Clifford Omoruyi, just from the SEC championship game, where what did he have, like 2 rebounds or 1 rebound against Florida in that loss? And now he's just been everywhere. You look at him with his double-double, and he won the hard hat against St. Mary's. But you also look at, Grant Nelson dealing with a knee injury coming in both games, doing really well. He was big early on, especially on the glass. I was really impressed with what I saw from him. But you look at this team, I think it really has answered the call. I think it, got a little bit ticked off. I think
Yeah.
they heard about how they were going to. I think I heard, in the interviews, Grant Nelson talking about how teams were talking about how they were soft and, how they weren't going to win the rebounding battle. And they wanted to prove themselves. So they came with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. It showed. And I think you got to be really impressed what you can see from this front court. That's always been a thing that maybe gets overlooked with Alabama. Alabama is also one of the best rebounding teams. Everyone thinks of them as a shooting team because they, jack up so many threes, but really, they're a team that can win on the glass as well. And so I think they showed that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing that was key in the difference in the St. Mary's game is, Alabama, 8 offensive rebounds, 10 second chance points. St. Mary's had 15 offensive rebounds, 9 second chance points. So, Alabama did a good job when St. Mary's did get a lot of those extra possessions to contest those shots, limit how many points they were getting off those O boards, which I think obviously really helped them, propelled them to a big win. And yeah, I think you're right. I think they absolutely get ticked off. I think, the difference has always been in losses, can they do it against teams that don't rebound well on paper? And when I look forward to, a team like BYU, and we can talk more about them, they're not as known on the offensive glass on paper. They're a good team. They're a good offensive team. But I think it's now going to have to be, can you keep that anger? Can you keep that pride in winning that rebounding battle? Because that's what's going to win you that game too. So I think that's going to still be a big point of emphasis going forward. But I thought that was a major growth point from game 1 to game 2 in terms of how Alabama found a response, because if they didn't, they were going to lose that game. And instead they dropped 80 points on St. Mary's.
The first team to score 80 points on St. Mary's since 2022
is 105 games.
Yeah, that's pretty. That's pretty good. I mean, this is a St. Mary's team that not only plays good defense, but also plays so slow that you just don't get a lot of opportunities to score 80 points. So yeah, I think that was it shows you how elite this Alabama offense is. I think we all kind of know, and maybe an 80-point game is not the matrix that you look at, or the production you look at to prove the point that this is an elite team. But against the St. Mary's team, 80 points is basically a 100-point game.
Yeah, and I mean, to that end, I think the other big jump that this team made from game 1 to game 2 was the balance in scoring and the efficiency in scoring, right? Like, we knew this offense was elite, but it was, can they be efficient in a game where, Alabama typically pushes 80 possessions a game when it's able to run its tempo. St. Mary's likes to keep teams closer to 60. It was kind of in the middle of that. And I thought, Tony, compared to the Robert Morris game, I thought the scoring balance was so much better. I mean, they obviously shot the ball much better from 3, but I think, to that end, 7 of 17, it wasn't jacking up a million threes, but they made the looks that they got. And, 41% from deep, I thought was huge, but then they were 51% from the field. Looked pretty grim. It looked like it would be a pretty grim game from the free throw line, actually, but they raised that up at the end too, finished 75%, which was above their season average. I thought that was crucial. And then the other big thing for me, 6 players in double figures. No one on this team had more than 13 points. And I think that's another really key element, because they played a St. Mary's team that only went 7 deep. They only played 2 off the bench in major minutes. And, Alabama was able to really out-depth them. And I thought they used their depth really well. No one played over 30 minutes for Alabama in this game. And you had just so many guys, so many waves of guys that I thought Alabama threw at this St. Mary's team offensively. I thought that was vastly improved from the Robert Morris game. I think, in that game, you had to see Mark Sears get 19 in the second half to kind of lift them, which, is great that they have a guy that can do that. But, when you have Sears at 12, Grant Nelson 12, Youngblood 13, Amore 10, Holloway and Dioubate both in double figures off the bench, I mean, that is just a flat out hard team to stop. And I think this is a team that uses its depth effectively. And if it could do that going forward, I think the sky's the limit for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think Nate Oates actually said that. Just how do you stop a team where you just don't know where it's coming from? I was really impressed with Chris Youngblood for stepping up. I mean, he's a guy that has been kind of quiet lately. And for him to go 3 for 3 from beyond the arc and really just, carry them through the first part of that game, that was huge. And like there's still room for improvement. So you had those 6 players that got double-digit points. I think LeBaron Philon, he's really been struggling lately, but the shots are going to start falling for him. Maybe not so much in terms of like, he's not a guy that's just going to light it up from 3, but he can get some points, and he just hasn't. And he's done it in other ways. He's gotten 13 assists over Alabama's first 2 games, which is really solid. But the shots, as good as Alabama is at spreading the ball out and the points that they've scored, the shots aren't really falling for them where they could be. So there's plenty of room for growth. I mean, Mark Sears is putting up points, but he's getting it, at the line or driving to the lane and getting the points. He's, I want to say it's 1 for 9 in the tournament from 3. So, you would think, right, that those numbers are going to go up. I mean, for Alabama's sake, you would hope, but so as good as it's been, I think it could get even better. We'll have to see. Obviously, these games are going to get a lot harder. So just to say that it's going to get better, but because they're due, that might not be the smartest way to approach something, just with how good these opponents are. But I think you have to have a really positive outlook when you look at the way things are going for Alabama, and just what to expect from them moving forward. Just because it's just been there's a lot of ways to take optimism from this team, because I think as well as it's playing, it really hasn't reached its full ceiling.
Yeah, I mean, I think they can absolutely have a more explosive night from 3. I think you're right. There's going to be a regression to the mean thing for someone like Mark Sears, it feels like. And this is why I love the tournament so much, because you have, I feel like this year especially, you've had a lot more arguments over kind of depth versus having this elite starting core and sticking with them. I think it was Ben McCollum, who I guess he's now Iowa's coach, but was the Drake coach during the tournament, said, why would I play 10 guys so I can swap out 5 and lose the momentum? Like, some teams think like that. I think Alabama, the luxury it has is, you have this talent, and then on top of the talent, it seems like you are getting this collective buy-in at the right time where, there's not really a drop off. When one group goes out, even after Alabama goes on a run, you're able to kind of keep that rotation going, because the second unit or whatever, next line of players you bring in is going to kind of keep things going. I think that's what we've seen. I mean, Nate Oates, the guy he talked about too, was a guy like Darion Reed in the first game against Robert Morris, made the most of his 10 minutes on the court. And he's a guy who, kind of like Mark Sears, can probably get going a little bit more. He's getting his legs under him. He's been dealing with injuries. So you just have so many guys that you can throw. I think the depth that was so highly talked about so many months ago in the preseason is really finally showing. I think it did against St. Mary's, and I think you can have nights where Mark Sears scores 25 to 30 points and win, or you can have nights where Sears scores 12, but you've got 5 other dudes in double figures. Either way, it's going to be pretty hard for a team to stop. And St. Mary's is the 7th best defense in the country, and couldn't do it. Gave up literally a historic amount of points for their standards. So I think that's all incredibly impressive. I like the way these guards are taking an unselfish thing, or a kind of an unselfish role. I mean, Philon, 6'6", 5, 2 blocks, 3 steals. I mean, he's still finding ways to be so productive in the scoring. And like you said, I think that will, hopefully for him, he'll find some more buckets himself too as we move forward here. And that's the thing. That's the place to really go now is you're always looking ahead in the NCAA tournament, and Alabama knows its matchup now. It's headed to the Sweet 16. A little bit of a easier matchup on paper than the Sweet 16 last year, where of course it played the 1 seed, North Carolina, in their region. But they're playing a scrappy 6 seed in their first game in Newark, New Jersey. They're staying out east first and foremost. So last year, if you remember, the Tide stayed out west. They went straight from Spokane to LA. They're doing the same thing. They're staying in the Eastern time zone, going from Cleveland straight to Newark. They will play BYU. That game is set for Thursday. Going to be I think it's 6:09 tip-off time on CBS. It's always a goofy tip-off times in the NCAA tournament. But when you look at this path, Tony, for Alabama, it's BYU, and then you look ahead at the upper region. 2 teams, surprisingly, they haven't played for as many as they've played in the Sweet 16. Duke and Arizona this season. Arizona team Alabama played in the regular season last year. But starting first with BYU, I can get into your outlook on them, but just maybe your opening thoughts on that draw. Another case where I think you can overlook them just because they're not the 3 seed, they're the 6 seed. What do you think of that game? And when you look at Alabama's path as a whole, we can get into some specifics. What do you make of it after seeing what this team's given in the first 2 rounds and how they could maybe get back to the Final Four here?
Yeah, I think when you look at BYU, it's a lot more like Alabama. We were talking about, Alabama going against these slower paced teams or these contrasts of styles. BYU is a team that, can really put up points, can really score. I think they ranked 25th nationally in scoring. So it's not necessarily a defensive team. This is going to be more like Alabama going against itself. Somebody asked Nate Oates after the game if this is more of a relief. And he said, well, I don't know if going against us is a relief. He doesn't want to act, I think he makes up a good point. It's not like people look at Alabama on the schedule and say, oh, wow, we get to go against them. I mean, I think saying that BYU is like Alabama is a huge compliment to BYU. I mean, so they're a good team. It's going to be, I think, more aesthetically pleasing basketball than we've seen, just because I think it's going to be a little bit more fun to watch, a little bit more free flowing. But this is a BYU team, like you said, that is you cannot take lightly. It's really good, and it's playing better than a 6 seed or what you'd normally expect from a 6 seed. In fact, I think, heading into the tournament, I know your bracket, you had them beating Wisconsin, I think, right?
I ended up flipping a little bit of homerism.
Okay, well,
but yeah,
you're going to have them beat Wisconsin.
Yes. No, they're a good team.
I wasn't shocked when they beat Wisconsin. I think from an Alabama standpoint, I don't know how excited most of the time, from an Alabama fan standpoint, you're probably excited when there's an upset like that. I don't know if Tide fans were, I don't know if they were excited for that one as much because BYU's probably just as good of a matchup as Wisconsin would be. So, I think it's definitely, it's a winnable game, but it's not an easy game for sure.
So the way I was going to lead into BYU is I was going to say exactly that. They're 24th on KenPom, the 9th rated offense and the 71st rated defense. And I was going to say, who does that sound like or remind you of? And I think it's a lot of similar to Alabama, but to put into context to how good they've been, there's another metric site that's very similar to KenPom called Bart Torvik, but they allow you to re-rank the teams based on a certain date. Since February 1st, they have BYU as the 10th best team in the country. They have been really, really good. Started off Big 12 play kind of slow, which is why their seed kind of got dinged. But yeah, this is a legit scoring team. They had that Wisconsin game, by the way, was a classic. I mean, 91-89. I think you're going to see a very similar score line against Alabama. I'd be shocked if it wasn't that high, and if it wasn't a really entertaining game. A couple of players to know. Their leading scorer is a guy named Richie Saunders. He's really efficient, averages 16 points a game. He's almost a 50-40-90 guy. I think he's 85% from the free throw line, but 40% 3-point shooter, can score at the rim. He is a really kind of fill it up bucket getter guy. And then the name people might know a little bit more is they have a freshman. His name's Igor Demin. He is not their leading scorer. He's averaging about 10 a game, but he is the 9th rated prospect on ESPN's latest big board of prospects. Kind of he's described as a polarizing prospect. He's not a very good outside shooter, doesn't shoot free throws very well either. A little bit of turnover prone stuff. So I'm making him out to be he's not a very good player, but he's kind of their connector guy, really good playmaker. I think he leads them in assists. And he's a 6'9" guard. So he's that modern NBA build that a lot of teams really like. He's a hard defensive assignment for that reason. Be interesting to see how where Alabama goes on him defensively in terms of trying to limit kind of his playmaking. The other guy I will mention, and this is my big thing when I look at this matchup, is, you go back to the Robert Morris game. Robert Morris didn't have a guy above 6'9" in its starting 5. BYU does not either. That said, their center is a guy named Keba Keita, who is averaging more rebounds a game than he is points. He's averaging 7.9 rebounds a game. For context, that's about as much as Grant Nelson is averaging, as Alabama's leading rebounder at 6'10". He is a guy who absolutely plays bigger than he is, and he wants the ball more than everybody he's playing on the court with. I think that's going to be a really key matchup I watch. They have a couple guys in the front court like that are just sort of energizer bunnies. When I watched that Wisconsin game, it was like watching a couple Mouhamed Diabates out there. I'm not trying to overblow anything, but they absolutely want it more than their opponents when they crash the glass. I think that's going to be a huge thing to watch. That's what I see in BYU. That's my main thing, along with kind of the scoring they can bring with Saunders, Demen's kind of playmaking. I think some of their rebounders, just with how Alabama has struggled when it's not, oh, we've got 3 7-footers, or, oh, we're ranked first in the country in rebounding. BYU isn't, but they have guys who can go get boards, and that'll make a difference in the game. I think that's going to be huge. I don't know if you have any other thoughts on BYU, but when you look then, Tony, to the other side of the bracket, of course, it's either going to be Arizona or Duke that Alabama faces in the Elite Eight, should it get past BYU. Do you have any impressions on either BYU lingering things or takes on Arizona or Duke from what you've seen in the tournament?
I'm already nothing to take away from Arizona, and they've got a good team. I actually picked Arizona. So I can't believe I'm saying this now, but like, just after seeing Duke just steamroll through teams, it's hard to pick against Duke right now. So I think it's going to be Duke. It certainly could be Arizona. Tide fans will remember Jaden Bradley. He's on that team. They also got Caleb Love. It's a good team. It's a good Arizona team, but this Duke team is special. I think it's going to end up being, if Alabama wins against BYU, I think they're going to end up playing Duke. But look, once again, I think that Alabama can beat a Duke team. You know what I'm saying? It's faced up against, quality bigs like Cooper Flagg. Look, they beat Janai Broom, the other player of the year candidate. So it's not like they're going to be intimidated by Duke. They have the defenders to stop a lot of their guys. Things are going to have to go pretty well. You can't have Alabama's gotten by with overcoming certain big flaws just with how balanced they are, whether it's, the shooting from Mark. I think you're going to have an overall solid game. You're going to have to be at least, A- at every category that you have basically to beat a Duke, but Alabama's certainly capable of doing that. And I think that, when things, I'll even make the argument when things are clicking for Alabama and everything's going right, I think its ceiling is arguably even higher than Duke's. And I think that's kind of crazier to say, but if you get, Alabama with Mark Sears being last year's tournament Mark Sears, and you've got, Mo Diabate now just being an absolute, just crazy glue guy off the beam. He's almost turning into Herb Jones. I know it's so cliche to say, but you've got him coming off the bench. Grant Nelson, Clifford Omoruyi is a totally different player in this tournament. Alabama's a scary team right now. But Duke's also a scary team. So I'm excited for that matchup if it happens. And I expect it to happen. That's what I currently have. But like I said, I think Alabama has a chance. I really do like this team's odds of making the Final Four.
I do too. I look at BYU and it's just a team that plays similar to Alabama. And I think Alabama likes, that's the good thing. It can play contrasting styles. It can play into its own style. And then where you have to elevate against Duke. I mean, I mentioned BYU's been the 10th best team in the country since February 1st. Duke has been the best. They have had the number 1 offense and the number 10 defense. And Alabama has sometimes struggled against teams with that kind of balance, namely Florida. They did it against Auburn. They overcame that. And since February 1st, Alabama's been the 5th best team in the country. So, it's going to be a clash of 2 really elite teams. I am super intrigued if that game can happen. But first and foremost, I think you have to get by BYU. For me, with Nate Oates with a week to prepare, I think is going to have, them ready to go. I think it's just going to be about players buying in. You can't have another Robert Morris. BYU will run Alabama out of the building if that happens. So, you can't overlook them, certainly. And we'll see how it goes on Thursday in Newark. I'm super excited for that game. It should just be a fun game, too. It's not going to be St. Mary's. St. Mary's is just so boring to watch. I was so not moved by watching them play basketball.
Yeah. I'm done with that. I think, you're going to get a let's just say like Alabama makes it all the way to the Final Four in the championship game. I think the Newark tournament, the teams that they'll play in Newark, those are going to be aesthetically pleasing. I think, Alabama and BYU will be fine. Actually, I think it'll be a great watch. Alabama Duke will be a great watch. If they go to the Final Four, though, I think you're going to get hit with another
You got Houston or Tennessee, and
you got Houston or Tennessee or Purdue.
or Purdue.
Yeah, it's like those three teams. I mean, I guess you could root for Kentucky. I don't think Alabama fans should root for Kentucky on the bottom. I just like, I was one of those people that was like, oh, you don't want to play a team 3 times. I don't think you want to play
4 times.
4 times. So, I think if it's not Kentucky, then if Alabama makes the Final Four, we're going to go back to the rock fights that we've faced. So.
Yeah. The interesting thing, of course, those 4 teams below, looking all the way to the Final Four: Houston, Tennessee, Kentucky, and Purdue. Alabama's played all of them. In fact, Kentucky, Tennessee, a game that will be the third of which Kentucky's beaten Tennessee twice. So that'll be a fun one.
Right. It's crazy. I said the stat about the 8 of 16 teams. I think if you went chalk, and Alabama makes the Elite 8, counting, I guess, Duke, I think they will have played. Or no, not counting Duke, counting BYU. No, sorry, yes. Okay, saying this again. If you go chalk and you say who you think is going to win in these Elite 8 games, Alabama will have played, I think, 4 of the 8 Elite 8 games, and then it could go up to 6 if Ole Miss wins and Arkansas wins. So that's just crazy to have played that many of the Elite 8 teams, especially when you consider that Alabama once again would have possibly been one of those Elite 8 teams.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. Credit to the SEC too for being very, very good at hoop this year. I think they set the record in the Sweet 16 with 7 teams. I think it was past the ACC in 2016 with 6. So, yeah, Alabama first and foremost has BYU. Those guys are going to be feisty. They're going to be up for it. It'll be a fun game in Newark. We'll see what the fan count is like. That's far travel for kind of both teams. A little bit further for BYU, obviously, but we'll see how they. How it looks over there in the Prudential Center, home of the Devils in Seton Hall, if you were wondering that, by the way. 6:09 on Thursday is when that game is. We'll have plenty of coverage in the build-up to it. Really excited. Obviously, spring football is still churning along, too, so we've got plenty of that coverage as well. Recruiting's heating up, so a bunch of stuff over on Tide Illustrated. So go subscribe there. Subscribe here on the YouTube. Give us a like. Comment. How do you think Alabama against BYU is going to go? What were your main takeaways from the first round? Let us know. Give us a follow on Spotify if you're listening. We'll be back with plenty of more coverage of Tide Hoops as it tries to get back to the Final Four. Until then, we'll see you next time.